My name's Paul Goddard, and since a young age I've had a love for all Q sports. In August 2019 I interviewed the EPA Men's Seniors pool team for a documentary I was making. One of the seniors was professional pool player Keith Brewer, who spoke about his successes.
The 8-ball there, Keith Brewer's done it.
But also his biggest disappointment, which was losing the men's world final in 1998 to Carl Morris.
Not a lot Keith Brewer has done has turned out magic.
I reached out to Carl on YouTube and he kindly gave me a clip to show as part of this documentary. However, at this moment in time I knew very little about his life. After some research, I found out what an interesting, compelling and motivational life he leads. I found out that after a childhood illness which left him profoundly deaf and without the ability to speak, his parents were an inspiration and great help in making him the man he is today. His success story is an inspiration to all of us, proving that nothing is impossible. So sit back, be inspired by this wonderful man.
Make that one pot away. The crowd senses it. It's down, and Carl Morris has just become the youngest Embassy Whirlpool champion since this tournament's history.
We'll start right at the very beginning, and the very beginning is, what is your earliest memory?
Well, my earliest memory for me is the tinnitus that I used to get, and the fact that I used to think that there was monsters everywhere in my room. Because I think when I lost my hearing through meningitis, and a lot of people may not realise, but when they were deaf, you suffer from tinnitus, a ringing in the ears, which I believe forms as a substitute to not being able to hear sound. But when they were 3 years old, we don't understand that. And the fact that I can communicate with my parents meant they couldn't tell me that it's only tinnitus, there was nothing to worry about. So when I used to go to bed at night, it was the worst time because you go to bed, you turn the lights out or whatever, can't see anything, can't hear anything, and the tinnitus would suddenly get worse and louder. And being a 3-year-old, I was convinced that there was monsters everywhere, hiding everywhere, and I just wouldn't let my mum leave the room until pretty much I'd fallen asleep, exhausted from all the crying, and that stands out more than anything.
I can only imagine how frightening that must have been as a child. Now, when you were in hospital, and from your experience, one day you could be hearing fine, and then the next day, once it seemed like you were recovering, you woke up completely deaf. Is there anything that parents could look out for if they're in a similar situation to you, if they're looking after a child with meningitis, of little warning signs, because it seemed like you made a complete recovery?
Yeah, I'm not sure about complete recovery, apart from the fact that I was deaf, and what a lot of people don't realise is that and I thought that I got out of meningitis and I was deaf, but it was only looking through the records, the court records, because I went to the London High Court for 8 years, and I was looking back through those that, since my parents are not alive anymore, I can't really ask them any questions, so I have to refer to that. But I discovered something, that I actually survived meningitis and woke up and came out of the coma. Everything was fine. I could hear. I was speaking to my parents. But then a couple of nights later, I just went to sleep one night and woke up and my hearing is completely gone. But not just that, I think it wasn't obvious at the time, but I think it had a massive impact on my memory, and it also had an impact on my eyesight as well. Because if I close one eye and then close the other one, it's different colours. So, obviously I'm used to life with both eyes and that. But obviously, as I got older, it became apparent that it affected my memory, because I have to do repetition when I'm to school. I have to do repetition, looking at things over and over again before it will stick in my head, and I'm still the same now. So I think, obviously, the deafness has left me profoundly deaf. It affected my eyes a little bit, not that it's made any difference to life. But the memory, well, people can say stuff to me and get away with it because I forget. So...
Well, you said it's affected your eyes. How fantastic you are, and becoming world pool champion, I think just shows that your eyesight is completely and utterly fine.
Just imagine if I had perfect eyesight, just how much better I would be.
Absolutely, just dangerous.
Has he got one more trick up his sleeve? He's shown us a couple in this match. A testament, really, to how well Mick Hill has played. And that is just a mighty slash, but
that is absolutely ridiculous.
And he puts his hand up, but what happened? I blinked.
Double to left centre, cue ball, top cushion into the problem.
Oh, well, he's still got half a sniff, but that's unlucky. Nailed the double, didn't quite get the line right. Red going in isn't an issue, but the white not going into the pack is. Can he salvage something? What a shot. Has he got a shot?
Shot.
Wow, Carl Morris. Wow.
That is incredible.
Carl Morris plus match clock equals fireworks. 10 seconds left. Is he going to tie it? I've said it before, I'll say it again. You're joking, Carl Morris. How on earth does he keep on doing it?
Now, I know your parents, you had some amazing parents, and they were often cruel to be kind. And if you wanted a sweet, they would get you to say, please may I have a sweet, rather than just sweet. Can you say a little bit about that, please?
Yeah. I think before the "can I have a sweet please," I first have to master a single letter, a single syllable, a single sound, because when I lost my hearing, it's very hard to understand the mind of a 3-year-old. I can only go on my own memory, my own experiences, but obviously over time, I'm talking about 40 years ago now, you have to sort of like look at a lot of factors in life to try and best estimate what happened and why a child would think a certain way, why a child is a certain way. And my view is that as a 3-year-old, when I lost my hearing through meningitis, Mum told me that my speech dropped down very quickly until I got to the point where I didn't speak at all. And I think that happened because you're 3 years old, and when you speak, you can't hear yourself speak. You can't hear other people speak. So what's the point of speaking? Because nobody else can hear you. When you say something and somebody says something back to you, you can't understand what's being said. Nothing makes sense. You think as a 3-year-old that the whole world has changed, not you. But obviously when the time came, that I saw a friend getting a sweet from his mother, and I've seen it happen a few times, and I could see his mouth going. So I'm thinking, he's going, and he's getting a sweet. I'm going to try that. So I go back home, and I say to my mum one day, because he told me this, and she said, you came in one day, and he went, wee! And I thought, I thought you said you wanted a wee, to go, go to toilet and that. I mean, I didn't stop to think what you could want. I was just happy that he was making a sound after so many months of complete silence. So naturally, I picked her up, rushed her up the stairs, and plunked her on the toilet. Put the pants down, plunked her. You got off, she said. Pulled the pants up and went, wee. And my mum said, I couldn't figure it out. It was a bit confusing. So I said, yes, okay. I pulled the pants back down, put it back on the toilet. And I was getting frustrated and exasperated. So I pulled my pants up, grabbed Mum by the hand, pulled her downstairs and pointed to the sweet cupboard and went, "Wee!" And of course, it was that moment that Mum realised I was trying to say sweet. But of course, when you're 3 years old, you see somebody say sweet, a deaf person sees wee because you can't see the S and you can't see the T, because the S is and the T, there's no movement. And of course, to start with, Mum was very happy. She gave me a sweet. But then she quickly realised, as she was saying, you need to be cool to be kind, because a kid would do whatever it is. They would go from A to B in the straightest possible line. And so it was at that point she started to say, come out with sweet. And I couldn't do that. But eventually, with the help of the National Deaf Student Society, they told her to get my hand and put it in front of her and to say, so I could feel the air coming out. So of course, it'd be sweet. And then of course you try and bring in the T. And again, I see what my mouth's doing and the air coming out in short, sharp burst. So eventually turn into sweet. Good enough, have a sweet. Do that a few times. And then you try and move on to the next step. Try and bring it together into a nice, fluent, sweet. And naturally, bit by bit, I get better. But like you were saying, she never allowed me to stay at one level for very long. She'd up the bar and refuse. Of course, a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, I'd have tantrums. And it can't have been nice as a parent myself when my kids get upset. It hurts me more than it hurts them. So I can only imagine what my mum would have had to go through. The resilience that she would have had to show and being, hard-hearted, but for good reason. And obviously, you and I today, we're sitting here talking. I still have a small impediment, but everybody can understand me. It may not be perfect, but then again, what's perfect?
To be honest, I actually find that because you're deaf, you're forming the words, because you say you've got a slight impediment. I think that if my grandparents, who are both no longer here, heard you because they had hearing problems, they'd probably be able to hear you better than a lot of people today, because you do form the words and really pronounce the T, whereas a lot of people today mumble the words. So I just wanted to add that in.
Yeah. I mean, people have got there's speech impediments, there's people have got lisps, there's all kinds of that. And some people just don't pronounce certain words properly through laziness. And I tell you a funny thing, when people have said to me, it must be difficult for you to understand foreign people, I say, actually, that's not true. And they look at me like, but English is their second language. I said, but what you don't realise is that these people, when they learn English, they learn to speak English properly. They form the words properly, whereas English people have got very lazy with the way they speak. And they sort of, like you say, mumble it or shorten it or just, that's better. It's better, not better or bella or whatever part of the country you come from. Foreign people say better. And therefore, it's a lot easier for me. So we could learn a lot from other people who speak English as a second language. That's what I think.
Absolutely, that's so true. So as a child, it must have been very tough, like you were talking about how tough it was for the sweet. What were some of your toughest times and how did you persevere?
The early years was very, very tough. A lot of down moments, far more negative moments than positive moments. I think it's just a combination of things because of the fact you're deaf, and when you go out into the big wide world, it made no sense. Everything came through mum and dad. If somebody said something, mum and dad would relay it to me. If they came up and said, "How is Carl?" Mum would always say, "Ask him, don't ask me, ask him." And of course, people felt awkward because I didn't have any speech, or at that point my speech was very bad. And I think it was just the whole experience of trying to break through that, get over that line where my language got to a certain point where people could understand what I was saying, and my lip reading got to a certain point where I could understand what was being said, because I think once I passed that threshold, life suddenly became better. I think for me, the toughest, the one thing that stands out, not on a single incident or occasion, but something that was consistent throughout my early years, was the isolation. The fact that it felt like, you know, that there's a saying, and I've always felt that to be true, and it says the loneliest place in the world is in a room full of people. Because when I'm in that room, whether there's 5, 10, 20, 50 people, I'm sat there, but it might as well just be me in the room on my own, in the dark, for all that matters, because I couldn't understand a word that was going to, it was just that sense of self-isolation, the fact that I couldn't be part of what was going on. It was a lot worse back then, but even today, I still get that when I go into a room. And the funny thing is, the difference between a young child and somebody like myself and my age with my experience, and the fact that I know how to handle my disability, means that if something's happening and I feel that it's starting to get out of control and I can no longer follow what's going on, I then try and take control. Because if I take control, then at least I've got a chance of understanding what's going on, and therefore being part of what's going on, being part of that environment, that occasion, whatever it is. And I suppose that's why I think throughout my whole life, I've done what I've done. I think it stems from the fact that I want to be in control of what's going on, because if I'm in control of what's going on, then at least I'm part of whatever it is I want to be part of. But I think there's a big difference between being in control and being a control freak. There's a fine line between the two, and I think I do very well to get to the point where I don't take it too far, where you're seen as a control freak, because naturally, if you're somebody like that, then you're not going to have a very good social life.
The National Deaf Children's Society was introduced to your parents. How did they first get in contact with them? Because it sounds like they did amazing work with your parents and yourself.
Yeah. Going back to that sweet incident, it was just before that that I was trying to say sweet, and my mum was trying to get me to pronounce the S and the T and a few other words. But because she was only 24 when I was born, so at this point she was only 27, still relatively young, back in the days when we didn't have no internet, where you can just ask Professor Google for an answer. And even if it's not entirely true, it at least gives you an indication of what you can and can't do. And she didn't know what to do. She was really struggling to get me to pronounce the word. And it was by meeting other parents of deaf children that somebody put her in touch with the National Deaf Children's Society. And it was the National Deaf Children's Society who then gave us some advice in terms of holding my hand in front of her mouth and giving little tips that went a hell of a long way to helping my parents basically to create the environment in which I could flourish. And obviously in them days, the only link was a telephone line to the headquarters at that time. They were only in London. So my mum thought, well, actually, they're saying that meet other parents of deaf children, learn from them what works and what doesn't. So I think it was at this point that my mum thought, well, actually, why don't we just form the Kent Deaf Children's Society, which is part of the National Deaf Children's Society, and you'll find these days that the National Deaf Children's Society is made up of a lot of local deaf children's societies under the same umbrella, putting parents in touch with other parents of deaf children, because it's a big thing that could never happen. And it was that point that my mum met parents of other deaf children and basically asked them questions, met the children, and then she came to her decision herself what she felt was working, what wasn't working, based on what the parents said and how the child came along. But the thing is, you can't sort of judge it on the fact that you say, this child is 7 years old, this is what this parent's doing, they're 7 years old, and they can't do this, that, or the other. Is that quite black and white? Is that because they may have some underlying illnesses, or they might have more of a more severe deafness, hearing loss? But I think over a period of time, by speaking to parents and meeting the children and speaking to them, you form your own conclusion as to what is the right thing. And then, of course, you take what you've learned and you try and apply what you think is relevant to your own child, depending on their needs. So it's very, very complex, but I suppose the more time you spend with people like that, the better an idea you have of what to do with their own child. And I think the same can be said for any disability, with parents meeting up, or people meeting others with their own kind of disabilities, because there's nothing better than learning from other people's mistakes, so to speak. And I think for me, that was a monumental and pivotal moment in my parents' life, when they made that connection between the NDCS and my parents, because then it opened up all these opportunities.
As Carl said, the internet wasn't around when he was a child. However, the National Deaf Children's Society have a great amount of resources. In the description are links to all the social media and web details that the National Deaf Children's Society have. If you feel that it could help someone else, please pass these details on to them. I know from experience like losing my dad that it got me into the hypnosis, hypnotherapy and neuro-linguistic programming that I do. What do you feel that deafness has given you? Because I find anything that life throws us, there's also a positive. Can you see a positive from what you went through?
Good question. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I would have been who I am today if it wasn't for the fact that I was deaf. Who knows? Maybe. It's funny when I say maybe I'd have done better with my life. Maybe I wouldn't have. But then again, what is better? Better for who? Better for what? But in terms of having the determination, the resilience that I've got for doing things like the North Pole, all the things that I've done in life, I think being deaf played a huge part of it, because it made me realise, when I was younger, as I was growing up, that if I wanted something, I had to work extra hard to get it. I had to make it happen, because without being funny, if somebody had a task and they looked at a room full of kids and there was one deaf person there, they never gave that task to the deaf kid. So I had to put myself forward, basically put myself in front of all the others to say, you want to give it to somebody, give it to me. And not really giving them the opportunity to give it to somebody else, just so that I could prove a point. And I think it's those constant knockbacks I've had. I've been overlooked and whatever else, that I quickly learned, if you want to do something, if you want an opportunity to do something, you have to not wait for it to come, but go out there and get it. And I think all that helped to develop my character to make me who I am. And I've carried that forward throughout my life. And I've always said to myself, and it's something else my dad said as well, when I used to play pool, he said, if you want something bad enough, only you can do it.
It's a story which you do say a lot, but I'd love to hear it again, because I think it's so important. And that's the kindness of the stranger when you're watching the other children playing football. Can you talk about that, please?
Now, when I answer this question, it's very hard not to be transported in my mind back to those moments, to that moment in time, because of what happened. It's burned into my memory so clear that it's very hard to talk to you about that moment. as a separate incident because I was there. But I do remember really wanting to play football. I'd never played with others or in a team because I couldn't speak very well. Other kids couldn't understand me, and naturally kids can be very cool. So I used to kick the ball about on my own in the back garden. And I spent hours and hours and hours doing that, probably far more than anybody else did. But I never had the courage or the confidence to ask if I can do it. And I used to go out and sit on the bench in front of my house. And then one day I was just sat there and I felt a hand on my shoulder. And I looked up and it's the kind face of a stranger. With his hand on my shoulder, he said, "Would you like to play?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, do your eyes work?" And I went, "Yes." And he said, "Do your legs work?" Stop and you go and play. And with that, it gave me a gentle shove in the direction of a boy playing football. And naturally, I was a bit hesitant. I can remember that walk, only 20 metres, 30 metres or so. It was like a very long walk. Every time I looked back, he was still there, just watching me, encouraging me. And I went up and I said, "Can I play?" You know. And of course, I got funny looks. Everyone all the kids kind of looking at each other thinking, "I really want this kid. He can play with you." They're obviously trying to palm me off onto the other team. And eventually, whatever was said, I couldn't understand. They put me in a team and they said, "You go that way, that way. Okay, I've got you." And suddenly, the ball come to me. And I get the ball, I'm nervous at first, but as soon as I get past the first player, my confidence grew. And because I think I spent so many hours with the ball on my own, I was good with the ball at my feet. I've gone past, I've scored a goal. They're all looking at me, and I could see, because when I'm small and all deaf and you can't hear a thing, you go by the body language of people. You learn a lot to judge what people are thinking, how they're feeling by their body language alone. After I scored that goal, I've looked around. The looks on their faces, they were stunned. They must have been thinking, how can this deaf kid who can't even speak properly be so good with the ball? And from that moment in life, it wasn't just the fact that this guy did me a massive favour by encouraging me to do that. My confidence has gone up. But from that point on, the bullying that I suffered was a big part of my life. Suddenly went from there to there. And from that point, I hardly ever suffered any bullying because suddenly I had newfound friends. Every time a football match was on, they'd come knocking on the door and asking my mum, can I come and play? And I never ever missed another match. And they would fight over me playing for their team as opposed to the opponent's team. And if I got picked on, I had 20 or 30 friends who would jump to my defence. It was, I just can't overstate how big an impact somebody can make in your life, even if it's just a minute of their time, like that stranger. And obviously after I finished playing football, I went back. That stranger was gone. I'd never seen him before, and I haven't seen him since. But if you ever see this video and you can remember that moment, the message is to anybody, really, don't give up a couple of minutes of your time if you think it's going to help somebody, because it has the power to reverberate throughout the rest of that person's life. So.
Absolutely. Just going slightly off track from the list of questions, because one more thing I wanted to add to you. As you said, children can be so cruel at times. Do you find that, unfortunately, a lot of adults think that person's deaf and put them down, even though there's absolutely no reason why they should do, just because they've got some strange inbuilt belief system about deafness and disabilities?
When people do videos and do interviews and they write articles, one of the things that gets me down is that people believe that, when we say, the attitude towards deafness 30 years ago was terrible. It's much better now. And exactly the same can be said for a number of other things. And also we can try and improve things like that. Everything goes in cycles, I believe, because it's better now. But then in other respects, with other disabilities, we have a look at what's happening with the world now. They're talking about being politically correct and all that. I think sometimes you get to a point where people are being pushed too far, being expected to remember too much. There's so many disabilities, so many variations of that disability. There's so many other factors they've got to factor in that I think you get to the point where people just don't want to know. I think all it comes down to is a really simple thing. Treat everybody the same. Treat everybody the same. Give everybody the same opportunity. You might have to give them those opportunities in different ways. But I think if people could just remember a few basic things and try and treat everybody the same, it makes the world a much better place. They don't have to go to a completely different level and make everything perfect for one disability, because, let's face it, we're never, ever going to get to that stage. There are just too many things in this world that if you've got three simple things, you can make A work with B, B work with C, C work with A. Sorted. It's functioning really well. But we haven't got A, B, and C. We've got D, E, F, G. The rest of the alphabet. Then we've got A, and AB, and AC. It's endless. When I see somebody in a wheelchair and it doesn't look like they can speak, doesn't matter. I'm not going to go up to the person pushing the wheelchair and say, how is he? I always go up to the person and say, how are you? And if I don't get a response, then it's an opportunity to speak. And I'm never afraid to ask, what's wrong? People are afraid of doing that. Don't be. Because if you don't know what's wrong with them, how the hell are you going to help? You ask them, they're deaf. Okay, they're deaf. Make sure they can see me. Problem solved. Not necessarily, I'm talking in simplistic terms when I say problem solved. But you've taken away 90% of the problems. You face a kid, or face a person, whoever they are. You ask them what's wrong, they struggle to walk. You see some steps. You know they struggle to walk. Would you like some help? Don't go, if I ask them, I might offend them. Because if that person with that disability gets offended with something so simple as that, it's the person with a disability that's got the problem, not the person that's asked them. If somebody talks to me, and they're moving their mouth a little bit too much and speaking a bit too slow, like I'm stupid. Hang on, very easy to get offended. But wait, that person, maybe they've never met a deaf person. Maybe they've met two deaf people, but they both required them to speak like that in order to be understood. So naturally, they would try and do that with me. It is up to me as a disabled person to say to them, I appreciate you trying to make it easier for me, but no need to slow down your speech to that speed or open your mouth to that level or whatever. Just speak normally. As long as you face me, I can understand what you're saying. If all the people with disabilities can just do away with it, we talk about on a separate matter, and I might be touching on something a little bit controversial here, but what the hell, I'm not here to worry about what other people think or what the world's going to think. And we talk about all these black movements, and people talk about black. I remember going through it, and I used to do a lot of work in South Africa. Oh, don't say black, you've got to say coloured now. And then it's, don't say coloured, I'm not coloured, I'm black. Yet when people say white, I don't turn around and say, oh, I'm not white. That's white. I'm not white. If somebody doesn't want to be called black, it's fine to say, I prefer to be called this, that, or the other. Just say it. But they're trying to make everything uniform in a way. I think personally, the world has gone a bit batshit crazy if they've taken everything too far, because everyone's frightened of being sued, frightened of upsetting somebody. I think it just comes back to two basic things. Don't try and conform to a certain idea that places every black person or every white person or every deaf person, because we're all individuals. For God's sake, just come up to me and say, you know, when they're speaking to me, I'm speaking to you in this way. Is it okay? Can you understand what I'm saying? And let that person answer. Let that person help that person to help you. Because if we can just have that, because when we go through life, maybe apart from meetings where there's a lot of people involved, 99% of interactions in life is one-on-one. And if they can learn to do things right between person A and person B, and do that on each and every occasion, well, I mean, I think a lot of the world's problems have gone. That's all I can say about that, really.
Yeah.
People do get great. If they don't, but that's the great thing about humankind. We've all got our own opinions. It's up to them what they want, but that's my personal belief.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree with you more. We'll get back to having fun with the deafness later, because we've got a mutual friend which you talk about later on. But the next question, because I want to stay with the childhood, is about your childhood acting and how you became a child actor.
Funny that I never set out to become a child actor. I went to a boarding school called Ovendene in Brighton, and they used to have drama. And drama was great. I used to love drama because it's all acting. And for a deaf person, I mean, what more could you ask for? Everything that was in play was, apart from maybe the speech, the talk aspect of it, but with everybody being deaf, we was all aware anyway of what was going on, so we could be fully immersed and fully part of the drama act. And one day, the school got in touch by Alamo Productions, who was producing a series called Love Hurts, and they said basically we're looking for one deaf child to play the part of Alex, a deaf child within the series. What we'd like you to do is to carry out an audition and pick 2 people from your school, and we've asked a lot of schools around the UK to do the same. We will send somebody to your school to pick one out of the 2. So that's just, we said send somebody to each school. I got picked with another guy called Alex, coincidentally. We had to do our part. And I can remember that it's because we were given parts we had to do. And then we had to sort of like try and change our voice, our expression, pretty much what you do as an actor. And I think I did all right there because I got picked out of the 2. Got invited up to London. Now, and I think on the auditions were over 2 days, and I think there must have been something like 150 to 200 people, because the amount of people that were coming and going in that room. We didn't know what time. We just had to spend the day there and wait to be called out. And I was one of the last ones to get called. I think it was about 4:30. We'd been there since 8 o'clock, and it was 4:30. I walked into the room, and we're going back over 30 years, 32, 33 years. But I remember, I think the guy's name is Morris Green, one of the directors, and there was another guy, I can't remember what it was called. But instead of walking into a room, and I was 11 years old, instead of walking into a room and letting them sort of start proceedings, I can remember exactly what happened. I walked into that room, sat down in front of, I think it's about 4 people, including the directors, and I took control of the room, and I said to them, before we start, can I just say that it takes me a moment or 2 to get used to your lip reading pattern, so if I can't understand what you're saying, forgive me, but we'll get there. And I remember the looks on their face, thinking, this 11-year-old kid coming here, sat down, and just took control of the room. I didn't realise the significance of that time. But we proceeded through the interview, and I had to act a few sentences out. Now, usually they allow you to go home, and they'll inform you whether you've been accepted. But when we went to leave the room, they called my parents in, came back into the room, and I'm stood there and the parents were talking with me, I was green, they kept looking down on me. And I can remember them looking at me like they were so proud, my parents, they were so proud. And I thought, well, maybe they're just saying some good words. I didn't realise what was said. I'd love to have been the director at that time, because when we were in the car driving back home, I was sitting in the back going, I really hope I get the part. I really hope I get the part. And my dad was driving. He looked back, and my mum turned round, and she gave me a very strange look. And I said, what's that? She said, you've got the part. And I went, what do you mean? She said, you've got the part. Didn't you understand what they were saying in that room? I said, oh, no, I would just, you were all talking, and I couldn't really follow what was going on. But yeah, before that, I think I was going, have I, really, have I? Yeah, you know, kind of like a kid would. But of course, it made sense why they looked at me, because as a director, they're thinking, we've just given this kid a TV part, and he's just taking it in his stride. He's not jumping around like a typical 11-year-old. But the truth be known, I didn't know, I didn't understand. So I think that was the point. And from that point on, I had to sort of juggle school with acting. But I was going to boarding school in Brighton, and parents used to come down, pick me up, drive me to London, where the majority of the acting was, in Hertfordshire. So I did 2 series, 10 series the first year. The second series, obviously in the second year, but when it came to a third series, it was clashing with my GCSEs. And I was taking quite a bit of time out of school, and because I wasn't a mega star, I didn't have my own bus and my own people and my own cook. There was a lot of hanging around. And in between the hanging around, I used to try and do my schoolwork. But sometimes a previous take, instead of taking 2 or 3 takes, they'd have to do 15, 20 takes because they couldn't get it right, or the weather conditions were wrong. We spent hours and hours and days just waiting. That wasn't the enjoyable part, but I managed to get my work done. But we realised that when it came up to my GCSE, that my schoolwork would suffer, and I was doing well at school. So the decision was taken not to do the third series, which was a class with my GCSE. Then, of course, I went back to school, did my GCSEs, and by that point, I realised that acting wasn't really for me, because I think it was all that hanging around that I didn't enjoy. So my great but brief acting career came to a halt.
I was going to say, did you ever think about taking it further? But it obviously seems like it was the GCSEs that caused you to think, this is time now then. Yeah. I just felt it wasn't really for me as well, acting. There was other things I wanted to do.
Slow, I've only got 10 minutes.
Okay, shh. I've got something to say. I know I don't spend... Watch my lips. I know I don't spend as much time with you as I would like to. All of you, not just Alex. I'm a rabbi. I'm a busy rabbi. I'm a sorry, busy rabbi. But that's all going to change. I'm not quite sure just yet how I'm going to manage it, but I will. More time together. Much more. Starting today. Alex, you will get more specialist help, but here at home, not at any school. Yeah. Right. I've given Rachel the day off. You're not going to school. I've cancelled all my meetings. So what do you want to do?
Natural history
That's
museum.
boring. It's better SummerSlam.
How about the seaside?
Alex?
Some pictures. Not again.
Well, it's been such a fascinating life so far. Now, what I've known you for, and why I first wanted to do the interview, but there's so many more fascinating stories from your life I've discovered since, is pool, and what happened and when you first picked up that pool cue.
I think I picked up the pool cue because of my dad. Like I was saying, when I was a young kid, I was 9 years old. Although I'd grown in confidence, it was still very hard for a kid to be part of a team. When you play football, as you get older, you start to communicate more. And then I started to miss that. And my dad realised that because he used to play a bit of pool, he was a decent player, not county standard, but a decent local league standard. And he thought, well, I'll take Carl with me because pool is an individual sport. Everything that I can learn is there in front of me, and I can learn by watching other people play and get better by practicing. So I didn't have to rely on anybody. So for the first time in my life, I had an opportunity to do something where I was in complete 100% control. So I started playing. But of course, I think the competition my dad put me in was maybe a little bit too soon, because that was at Queenborough Junior in my local town. I got drawn against a boy that I didn't particularly like. And he absolutely murdered me. I got stuffed on that table. And of course, a bit downhearted, but their dad was there naturally to pick me up, encourage me to play. Said, well, if you want to beat him, practice and then beat him next time. So of course, yeah, an opportunity. If they didn't have a competition in 6 months' time or 3 months' time or whatever it was, 1986 it was. So of course, it's the opportunity. I go and practice. Of course, when the next time the tournament came round, amazingly, I got drawn against the very same kid that beat me in the first round. Now, whether that was doctored or not, I don't know. I believe now it was, but of course at the time I didn't. So I played him. What's the result? I've absolutely stuffed him 4-0. It was great because he wasn't a nice kid. He wasn't very nice to me. So it was great to get one over. But better than that, I managed to progress and get all the way to the final. And then, of course, I've lost in the final. I mean, since then, I think I've won over about 400 titles. I've got a lot of trophies, given them all away. But if you don't mind, get it. Just to say, the plastic little thing probably cost £1. But it says in here, Karl Morris runner-up, 24th of February 1987. Not 1986, sorry, my mistake. But that means a lot to me because when I won that, for the first time in my life, I thought, I can do it. I can do it. Just 4 words, but big, powerful words, especially coming from a deaf kid that had been knocked back so many times. And here I was, proving to myself, if I set out to do something, I can do it. And I think that acts as a springboard for the rest of my life.
Amazing. It's a nice trophy too.
It's only one of the 5 trophies I've got. That one, the regional junior championships, professional title, first professional title, and first UK tour. The rest of them I just gave to charity. I got fed up polishing them.
I can imagine the amount you won. It would take you probably a good day to go through them all.
Yeah.
So you obviously were playing your dad when you were younger, Paul. How did your dad feel when you finally started to get better at pool than him? And was there a moment when you're thinking, before you went into the competition, wow, I can really, play well here?
I think the first time that I realised that I was a good player, a decent player, on the Isle of Sheppey where I come from, it used to have a really strong league. Back in them days, there was like 7 or 8 divisions made up of 10 or 12 teams. There's 40,000 people that lived on the island. So you can imagine what proportion of people played pool, but people also came from off the island to play on it. And there was a team called the Admiral, which was in Blue Town, a tiny little village where all the docks used to be. And in that team, I can still remember, there's a guy called Tony Gray, Ray Farbrother, Jack Connors. I can't quite remember the others, but they were the team. They won everything. They were a step above the second place team. And it was any aspiring pool player's dream to get into a team like that. And of course, I used to go and practice with them and that, because they were good players. I always believed that practicing with people better than yourself was the key to working their way to the top. You learn more from losing than you ever do from winning. And one day, I think I just turned 13, and I was asked if I would join the Admiral B team, which for me was, wow, you know, it was like, I don't know, it was like everything to me. But of course, at that time, I was still going to boarding school. I'd go to boarding school on a Monday and come back on a Friday. And it was about 2-hour drive with Dad, so a 4-hour round trip. But I tell you something about the kind of parents that I had to give me the opportunity to play. My dad would drive all the way to Brighton on a Wednesday afternoon to pick me up from school at 3:30 or 4 o'clock it was when we finished. And he'd drive all the way back home. We'd get back home about 6 o'clock, 6:15. Mum would have some dinner ready for me, straight home, eat something, straight out again. You know, take me to pool for two frames of pool. That could be over in 15 minutes, 20 minutes. But it wasn't that, it was the fact that I was part of this team. And then, of course, after the game finished, sometimes they put me on early because they knew I had to go back. And then that night, he would drive me all the way back to school to get back at 10, 11 o'clock at night, sometimes later, depending. Or if it was too late, I'd go very early the next morning. But I think it was that point that I realised they obviously thought I was a good player. And then within a year, I was playing county, playing for the Kent C team. And the next year, when I was 14, I was promoted to the B team, but they wanted me to go into the A team. But the committee members, which was full of old guys, didn't like the idea. It went against their regulations. Nobody goes from the C to the A team. We can't have that. So, of course, one of my teammates who played for Kent A gave up his place. He said, I quit. I want my place to go to Carr. Because he didn't want anyone else to miss out. Which I thought, bless the guy, Jack Connors, he's dead now, but I thought that was a brilliant thing for somebody to do for a kid. So, you know, the rest, as I say, is history. Because from that point on, I just went from strength to strength, turned professional at 16, international by 17, and then a world champion by 21.
Absolutely, and what a great guy to allay that opportunity as well. Really good of him. How do you get in the zone when you're playing pool, particularly winning and becoming world champion? How do you get in the zone?
I remember one thing when I was younger playing, because a lot of it is up here. People think it's all down there, but it's like any sport. If I'm not in the right frame of mind, don't bother. I think that's the difference between the top players and the fringe players, because they don't either. Maybe some players are good enough to be a top player, but they haven't got the mental strength or they don't get into the zone right. They let things distract them. When I used to practice, my dad used to stand in front of me and he would do this. And I stopped. I said, what are you doing? You're putting me off. He said, if you want to be the better son, you're going to have to learn with all the distractions. Oh, so every time I do, because when we play a tournament, people will try stuff. I mean, people do things like cough or put their drink down. Fortunately, I didn't have to worry about that because I'm deaf. And I always took my hearing aid off. I never wore my hearing aid. So I didn't have that distraction, just a visual distraction. But because I'm a lot more sensitive to what's going on in my peripheral vision, I had to learn to block that out. So I think we get to the point where we just have to forget everything else, focus on this shot and this frame. What comes next, you can't control. Don't worry about it. The mistake you've made, do whatever's right for you to get it out of your system and then forget about it. Anything else that's going on, just block it out and just focus on the here and now. And if you've got the ability to do that, then, well, it's just your scare that stops you from progressing.
What are some of your tips if you've made a mistake? Because I see so many pool players that make a mistake and then for the rest of the entire game you just see them punishing themselves.
And he doesn't have to do anything special with the white, Jerry.
Oh, he just broke his cue. He's just snapped his cue. Look at this. That's an action you see all the time from Strickland. And so often, he's in danger of breaking that cue.
It's good to punish yourself if you want to, but just punish yourself for once, there and then, before you play the next shot. If you get an opportunity to go to the toilet, if you've got to do that to get out of your system and you're allowed, do that. But like I was saying, I've seen people, like you say, where they're thinking about a shot they made two frames ago. I should have been 6-4 up instead of 6-4 down. How's that going to help anybody? And when I have been in position, when I sort of squandered a lead, I was 5-1 up, and they come back to 5-all. You can feel the pressure building, and you know it's very hard to sort of snap out of it because we're human, and it's a human element, your emotions that get better of you. But sometimes I've tried to switch it by saying, I was 5-1 up, and they come back to 5-all. I go to the toilet, or take a moment, or get a drink, or whatever. And I try and change my frame mind. I was 5-1 down, I'm now 5-all. I've won the last 4 frames. And you just try and convince yourself, because it's amazing, because when you have come from 5-1 down to 5-all, you're busting. Your confidence is high. When it's gone the other way, it's low. But if you can train your mind to block that out, and start again, like you just, or just say to yourself, would you take 5-all at the beginning, despite the fact you played terrible? Of course you would take it, and it lifts you up, anything to get you up. But the main thing is look forward, punish yourself at the moment, then forget about it.
You mentioned a little bit about pressure. This is something that I think so many players would find useful. For myself, if I'm playing like the club champion or something like that, you've got an opportunity to win. You see that black, it's a simple straight black, and that 8-ball becomes the most difficult shot in the world because the pressure you end up putting yourself, even just on a friendly. How do you deal with pressure?
That's the thing, you cannot see the black as a different ball to the rest of the balls. Sometimes, if you ever notice yourself, when you're queuing up early in the game, you're playing a shot that, if it was in the same position with the black, seems 5 times harder. But earlier on in the game, you're going to pop that ball and get position for the next ball. You'll just get down. In some ways, you're more concerned about leaving the right ball in the right place than you are about the pot. Yet, when you get to the black, you don't have to worry about position because there's nothing more to queue up for. So, theoretically, it's supposed to be easier. If anything, don't worry about the white. Which is why, people put a lot of pressure on themselves. They feel it differently. We'll just play the game, get to the black, and just play it like another ball. If anything, just say that you've got to play the black. If it's a relatively straight pot, play the black. You want to stop the white ball around there, just to normalise it. Don't think it's just the black. Everything's on the black. And just think, I've got a second black by the middle pocket. We'll just want to pop that, and it'll be on the black, or the second black. Just normalise it. Just get down. And also another tip, people breathing change when they get on that black. Sometimes they stop breathing. Can't do that. Stop breathing. Suddenly you get the tremors. Breathing, when they're breathing out, any tremors that you've got, come to a stop. That's why they say people say breathe in and breathe out. They do all that. Yeah, whatever. It's a load of. But it's true. Sometimes get up to the black or something. If you start to feel the nerves, take a step back, breathe in, and then as you get down, breathe out. And after breathing out slowly, all the nerves stop. Just get down and just take it. If you just do those simple measures, I think you should be able to take a lot of the pressure away from yourself.
Well, I'll be doing that next time round in the pool club, definitely. So you became world champion. How long did that take it for you to sink in that you had become the world champion?
To be honest, not as early as I thought. I thought, you know, I might have to. That was only my second ever World Championships, so I never really expected. But having said that, I did believe that I could, because the year before I'd come onto the scene, 1997 in Manchester, and the 1996 World Champion was Greg Found, and I got to the last 16. Now, in those days, in the golden era of pool on TV, when we used to have the proper setup, all the crowds, it was played at weekend, so it was always full, it was always a great atmosphere. And like after 2004, when I think pool went into decline, everybody wanted to get into the 8-foot tables and the TV tables with the crowd. So the last 16 match was like a final. You get through that, suddenly you're on television, and you've got another shine to get through. And I had to play Greg Found in the last 16, and he was the defending world champion. I've flown through it. I've gone 7-3 up in the first to 8, only one frame away from making it to the TV stages and the real chance of doing some good. But of course, I'm 20 years old. It's my first one. Talking about pressure, I think I've missed 2 blacks. I've missed other balls because the pockets seem to shrink and the black seems to grow. Suddenly I'm trying to put a bigger ball in a pocket that doesn't go, because I can remember getting down and feeling my head sort of turn, you know, burn up. It's like somebody placed hot coals in me. My arms started shaking. I couldn't do a thing right after that. I mean, obviously, when I locked that frame, went onto the next frame, I cleared up, got to the black, same thing again. And then it got back to 7-all. And I can remember being young, I got back to, he got back to 7-all because I was 7-3 up. I've made a terrible mistake to win 8-6. And he'd come back to 7-all. And what Greg did was go to toilet to leave me to stew on my mistakes. By that point, I hadn't learned to ignore. So anyway, this was one of the early gamesmanships. He went to toilet. And he'd gone for God knows how long, 10 minutes before he came back. And by then I was getting frustrated. And somebody said, when he comes back, you go to toilet. So I thought, good point, I'll try. So he came back after 10 minutes, went to play, and I said, sorry, I need to go to toilet. So I went to toilet, and I went for 5 minutes. Anyway, we played a man game with each other. We come back, we broke off. Greg missed the black cup, and he snookered himself on the black. Now I've still got 3 balls on the table, but amazingly, Greg come off 3 cushions and gone right behind the black and snookered me. So, you know, and I ended up losing. I got out of it, hit a ball, but he pocketed the black. So, but I tell you what, I learned a hell of a lot from that. And I think, like I was saying earlier, you learn more from losing than you do from winning. I learned an incredible amount from that World Championships. Fast forward a year, bang, I won it. And the thing is, in the first match, I was 6-3 down against the South African. And I come back to win 7-6. And I used what I learned the previous year to try and get me through that match. And then from that point on, nobody came anywhere near me. The only person that came near was Jason Twist in the quarterfinals, and that was 9-6. But the rest of them, I just demolished them. It was my year. And I could have won it a few times after that, but that's another story.
Coming up in part 2, the other story.
And of course, if you look at that video, you can see my mum seeing what's happening, stomping out. Oh, because it was an arena. The delivery went bang, bang, bang.
The grueling testing and training for the North Pole.
Because I pushed myself more than I ever thought was possible. When I got to the end, I collapsed and I was sick.
And Carl gets shot at in South Africa.
All the guys started swarming out. I got into the car, Ewan put his foot down and started going. And then I felt bang, bang, I didn't know what that was. And Eugene got my head and he push it down onto the seat of the car and he stuck just right.